Hi, friends. I'm Andy Green, and this week we're talking romance and being single because this is the Naked Man Podcast. I believe I met Marissa Flaxbart among mutual friends at a raucous birthday party at a bar. For a couple years, that was the way we'd meet. Over time, I discovered we were kindred spirits in not just the art life, but in life because we appreciate what's important: teen dramas. Sure, Marissa is a writer of plays, of podcasts, of stories, but she too is a podcaster. You can find her not only producing Maximum Film and Feeling Seen on the Maximum Fun podcast network, but she has carved out her own podcasting universe with Sweet Valley Diaries, a juicy podcast about Sweet Valley High, a series of YA romance novels that are the best way to spend an afternoon. They're like a literary equivalent of like a Cosmo, but for 15-year-olds. Since the beginning of 2021, Marissa has delivered a weekly newsletter in my inbox, her free exploratory series Metaphoria, that is her own sweet, melancholy, honest, reflective LA Valley diary. She's also a fierce supporter of the local arts and her friends' art. When I debuted this podcast, Marissa was one of the first people to reach out with congratulations and a desire to know more, to get involved. When I started Movies with Friends, Marissa became my choice for the first episode, for my first friend. I had no idea what I was doing, but she was there for it, supportive. She took me and the project seriously. And the best compliment I can give someone is that she made me feel comfortable fucking up. Being the guinea pig isn't an envious task, but she nailed it and will always remain a huge part of why I actually did and am continuing to do that thing. But today, we're talking something else. Today, we find ourselves talking about dating, about love, about romance, and about why it's so fucking difficult. Because Marissa is a self-professed romantic, and we are this afternoon a couple of Joes exploring that forever ache in our hearts. So without further ado, Marissa Flaxbart, welcome to the Naked Man Podcast.
Oh, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Andy. I feel like really important. You made me feel like I'm contributing to the world in a meaningful way. That's a nice feeling. I also think thank you. You too. I also think it is so appropriate that you mentioned our mutual love of teen drama and then set up the episode by saying that we were going to talk about, our like romantic bleeding hearts or whatever you said, because there is a little bit of that, like never totally gotten over your kind of the teenage sense of, how it's hard out there, but you want something special and you maybe it'll come your way. I mean, I have all sorts of reasons and thoughts about being stuck in teenhood, but
oh yeah, me too. I think it's a lot of unresolved stuff, and yeah, like for me, the teen drama I never had drama in my own life, so that's where. But I wished I did. Or like I was so waiting for, true love was real. I just needed to find it and who was out there. And it's taken, I think mid-20s to realize, took too long to realize that a lot of that is garbage. But also it's sweet and fun.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I think for me, and we can get into this as we go, but I think it's been a kind of yo-yoing back and forth in the sense of like, what do I need to reject? What did I try rejecting about my teenage idea of what romance was and what true love was and what I needed in a partner and what I needed in my life? And when did I kind of go too far past, and you rebel so far or you reject so hard that you actually, go too far and stop being kind of like true to yourself and have to like find your way back to the middle, something closer to the middle, closer to yourself.
I know exactly what you mean. I think
Oh, good.
No.
I'm so glad to hear it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just going.
But don't ask me to prove it. No. From like 18 to 24, that was me. I think, or basically college was the yo-yo in the other direction of like, oh, I think
that happens for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the stuff that I'm, still will always be exploring in terms of art and just me is like sort of that I was kind of asleep at the wheel, or that I did let that Andy go, the one that cares about things and people and like so much, in the way that you see, the glittering sky on these teen dramas or whatever, or like writing in the diary. Like I sort of got lost in the, college life, drinking and just sort of experimenting also, which I think is something I needed to do. But I guess we already are going far afield, but I want to check in with you before I'm already envisioning me like on the boat in Cape Side. Cause that's my happy place. I know yours is, Sweet Valley. You're like in the lockers or whatever, not in the lockers.
No, I'm Elizabeth Wakefield with her notebook, like hiding in a locker to hear the latest scoop about what's going on. Not to write about it, but just so that she can like butt in and help solve the problem. Yeah. I'm in the locker.
Okay, you're in the locker, and the question I have for you in that locker is how are you feeling in this moment? How are you feeling? It doesn't have to be about the topic at hand, just in general to like ground us in the right now.
Oh, I love that. I am going to answer that question by telling you that when I woke up this morning, I should probably have been thinking about the interview that I did at 10 o'clock this morning for a podcast it was important, and I needed to ask somebody some questions. I was doing an interview, and I also should have been thinking about the interview that I am producing at 3 o'clock this afternoon. That's important. But instead, I started thinking about this conversation and what it was that I wanted to say. And my brain was in all those places, but this was the place where, talking about my own sort of like romantic stumblings or whatever, it's something that I was willing to talk to you about it basically because you were willing to listen. And I feel like I don't really have a place to put it, even though it's something that, especially when I was a teenager, but throughout my life, is something that I do think a lot about. And then also think about thinking about, like maybe that's part of that correction thing. It's just like, maybe this isn't actually important to me in the way that I thought it was. Maybe what I'm looking for is something else or whatever. I mean, I showed up before we started the call and was joking about how I was like eating ramen noodles, like I was in the editing bay on like 30 Rock, or maybe I was Liz Lemon at her desk, just sort of like scarfing and like food on her shirt. Whenever I have food on my shirt, I think about 30 Rock and a moment where Suri asks Liz, she assumes that Liz has kids. And Liz is like, oh, no, I don't have any kids. And Suri is like, oh, I just assumed because there's always food stains on your shirt. And every time I notice a food stain on my shirt, I'm like, this is me. This is me living my Liz Lemon life. All that to say, I have recently started a very exciting full-time job. And that is a transition away from a year of fully being a freelancer. And the transition out of being a freelancer has not really happened yet. So I'm a little bit crazed right now, and kind of was imagining my whole schedule in life as if it were like, how many hours are there in a day, and forgetting about like mental energy and like, it's not just about like, where can you physically be sitting in a day? It's also like, how much, brain power do I have to expend as the day unfolds? So the middle of the day. So, to do with that information what you will.
Oh man. Okay. Let's parse through all these things. First off, I can't help but notice that immediately behind you on your wall, there is a small heart and then letters that just say love. And I'm just like, I'm just like, there we go. That's
pull this down. And let me pull this down because I actually want to show you what this really says.
Oh, like fuck
this
love.
Says, no, what it says is love in the stacks.
Oh.
This is something that I actually saved from my college years. I went to the University of Chicago. The University of Chicago is a weird place to go to college because it is actually like a graduate school. I don't mean the college is like graduate school. I mean, unlike a lot of schools, U of C is a much, much bigger graduate school than college. And so a lot of nerdy, weird college students. And I worked in the Regenstein Library, which is one of the biggest research libraries in the country there. And there were always kind of a running joke, although I'm sure there was a certain amount of truth to it, about people having sex at the Regenstein Library. Like, because it was such a big library and there were so many dark corridors, it was like you could go to, a particular corner of like the third floor or whatever, and nobody would be there because it was, the section about, I don't know, microbiology. That's a bad example. That would have been at Carrara.
Oh man, all of our listeners that love microbiology are very upset. That
but
one.
whatever segment it was. Anyway, so at some point there was some kind of romantic exhibition or something at the library that they called Love in the Stacks, and I found it to be really funny because, to all of the college students, when we saw the phrase "Love in the Stacks," our brains went straight to making love in the stacks.
Right. And
I've saved it all these years because it still makes me laugh.
I think it's funny. I think it's a great title for something.
Ooh,
and
yeah.
And I also I don't know. I think there is something to that. It sounds romantic, but also the practicality of oh yeah, making love in the library among books. Cause I know you're the biggest, you're a lover of words and books, and there's something in that seems, but then I'm also no, that would be weird and gross.
Yeah. The reality of it is it's very dark. And if the lights come on, they're fluorescent overhead lights, and it's cold, terrazzo tile floors and popcorn ceilings and sad people.
You're setting a scene though. That was, oh man, I mean, I
spent a lot of time in those stacks. I would work for Interlibrary Loan. I was pulling books off shelves to send to other libraries. So.
All right, let's,
this is so little to do with the topic at hand, but
no, it has so much to do.
Okay.
Marissa. And also good. I like that I was there's so much to parse out about what you said. And then I just pointed to something behind you. It's not at all.
You didn't do that, didn't you?
I needed to soak in what you said. Let's see. I want to make sure I didn't just miss everything in your intro. I feel like it's going to come back, but I realized when I was making this outline thing and I was very afraid in some way, I'm happy that I am the listener. I mean, and in every way I'm happy I'm the listener, but I sort of feel as the not single person, I don't want to come off like an asshole or something. It's hard to.
Oh, that's nice of you.
I guess. What I realize in that is that there's almost even some sort of judgment of oh, you're single, I'm not, I'm somehow maybe winning in some sort of way in this conversation. And I think that's bullshit. And also I think there's, being single, there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think I was saying that or meaning that, but I just wanted to sort of throw that out there. Because I mean, a lot of times, and this is actually inspired by someone who was on the podcast previously. She posted on Valentine's Day about how being single was a choice, and that that this is good for her. I think it probably goes into your romance too, because you're there's waiting for the right person rather than just being in a relationship to not be alone, which I think so many people are.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I appreciate that. I mean, on the one hand, what you're saying is true. It's part of a kind of societal perspective that is every bit as ingrained as all kinds of other, prejudices, inborn misogyny or, internalized racism or whatever we might internalize from our culture, is this kind of idea that to be unpartnered, to not have found your soulmate or whatever is to be flawed in some way. And it's something that it, pops up a lot, even when I don't want it to in my own thought process. But you're also completely correct that we don't have control over exactly who we meet and how those interactions go and where other people that we meet are in their lives when we meet them and all of these things that add up to finding a person. And we all also have different kinds of interests and desires, different needs that we need met by a potential partner. And it's very true that for me, a driving truth of my singlehood as a very romantic person has been that I have never been interested in, the way I would have put it when I was younger, is having a boyfriend for boyfriend's sake.
Yes.
And I actually have a very vivid memory of my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, telling me toward the end of her life that rather than, a lot of people have, a lot of women especially get a lot of pressure from their mothers, grandmothers, aunts, whatever, about relationships. My grandmother said to me, like, oh, you don't have a boyfriend? Good. Why have a boyfriend? Like, you need to have somebody that you want around. Like, you don't just want to like shackle yourself to some, guy who is going to drag you down or whatever she said.
I like your grandma.
Yeah. Well, more recently, I'll mention, I'm going to probably write a metaphoria about this at some point, but it's just so special that I almost want to, like, I don't know, it's like I'm saving it or something.
I know that feeling.
Yeah. I found this postcard last year going through some stuff at my dad's place. That my mother died when I was 15. So listen closely, listeners, and you can piece together some of what I'm getting at here. But I knew, she also told me before she passed away that she had been engaged before she and my dad got together, and it didn't work out, whatever. She was happier for it. But I found this postcard that she wrote to somebody but never sent, where she talks about how she broke off this engagement. And the postcard basically says, he's upset about it, but I am like so happy. Like, I just realized that I could do better. And I found this postcard from my mom, and it was just like, it was like a message through time, like, okay, I have this glimpse into how she might feel about my own sort of, I guess it's like a refusal to settle. But the thing is, and this is where I have to censor myself sometimes, because I start to sound like, an incel. Like, I just haven't, like, I wrote this, you mentioned I wrote a play. The play has recently become a movie. I know I just said a crazy thing comparing myself to an incel. I promise I'll explain what I mean.
Yeah, no, I'm letting we get there. We'll get there. I love it.
I don't love
that, but yeah, I love where we're going.
I'm like, I don't want to be like that. So in the play, I wrote, the play is about two single people that were childhood friends. And it is very much about singleness in a lot of ways, and like why people stay single, and why people who are looking for relationships in theory might not have found them. And it's a heterosexual relationship, and a man and a woman that were friends in childhood, but platonically. And there's a lot of myself in both characters. I got to see this play performed a lot of times, and each character had a part where it was just like, this is the part where I was the most honest in terms of my embarrassing feelings on the stage and now in the movie. So I feel very self-indulgent doing this, but can I essentially quote myself to you? So
please.
The character of Rose has this line where she, her friend is kind of asking her why she never got married. And she's like, after being exasperated about having, imagined a lot of guys into ideal candidates for the role, having had a lot of people that she thought would be the one, that she says, I think I'm cool, but men don't seem to. Men seem to like meaner women, thinner, meaner women that refer to them as their biggest child and have an active disdain for all their fondest interests. And at the time that I wrote that, I, immediately I was just like, this is so bitter. And then of course you can, part of writing dialogue is that you get to put that response in the voice of the other character, who just laughs at her and is like, you are so bitter right now. But, that's in my deep, I get frustrated sometimes, because I don't have low self-esteem, but I have come to a point through the years and years of like, just not really having it happen for me. I've come to this place of feeling like I have little faith in other people's ability to like see my value, and particularly as a partner, which is, I think it's a story that I tell myself, if we're going to get into like psychology language, but it's, you learn from past experience, right?
It's a powerful story. It's a sad, it's a sad story, especially since it's coming from experience, right? It's not like in your head, but I think that, I've been on the other side of that too, sort of just seeing everyone unhappy and being like, wait, I know, like, why is, but I also have been like, I think it's weird as the married guy now. For my whole life, I was the single guy, like it'd be me eating the ramen. I ate it. I scarfed it before camera. That was the only difference.
Okay. That is deeply insulting.
What that
You're equating my ramen eating during this interview to my singlehood. Like,
I did not mean that.
This is why I'm single, because I'm willing to eat ramen on camera during a podcast interview.
No, I think it's what makes you cool, because you are owning who you are, and this is what you're having ramen.
I'm
as
just
you
giving
talk.
You shit, Andy. You don't have to dig yourself out. It's okay. Go ahead.
No, I need to. That is what this podcast is. That's what everything I'm doing is. I dig a hole and I have to be accountable of that. Cause I mean, you're right. That makes sense that that it would sound like that. And I didn't mean it like that. I don't
want to cut you off, but I'm actually glad that I'm glad that you said this, because you're right. It really taps into something that, I mean, it happens in so many places, but for me, I know when I first wrote to you, it was about like, oh man, I have been trying online dating again, and it is freaking me out. Just that opening the app is freaking me out. That was, a year ago or something. It is a similar thing of like, you get to this place where you feel like if something is not happening for you, it must be your fault, And so in this case, to be specific, it's just like, if I haven't found a partner yet, other people have partners, like it must be my fault, which then, spirals into that same thing of like, well, what is it that's wrong with me? Which is kind of where you introduced the conversation. And that's the voice that you have to sort of shut down, because.
Right. There is nothing wrong with you. Other than that we're all human and we're all fuck ups, right? Like that's like, and that's.
You go back and you like, I can go back and review my life choices. And it's just like, I don't really think I would have made a lot of different choices, at least in regards to, romance or relationships, that would have somehow fixed it all, because you don't have control over other people too, is the other thing. But anyway.
Right. I think before I was like accidentally rude.
Sorry.
No. Why are you apologizing? I'm sorry.
I'm apologizing for derailing you.
No, God, there's nothing to derail. I think I was just I think what I was trying to get to is sort of that I feel like it feels like a blink of an eye ago where I was saying that I was you on that side is what I was saying. That's when I brought up the ramen. Like it would be me, not because that's why you're single. It's because I'm just saying.
Because that's what I'm doing right now.
The roles would be, yes, exactly. The roles would be reversed.
I gotcha.
Because, basically my whole life I was single, and I was always like bemoaning that. And always, whenever someone actually did like me, I always torpedoed it immediately, because I was like JD from Scrubs, where the smallest thing would be enough for me to like, oh, no, whatever. And part of that was just like an insecurity of like not thinking anyone could actually like me, or I always wanted what I couldn't have, all the like terrible toxic masculinity stuff too. But there was this just like, I've had 2 relationships in my life, and so I'm just having that moment sort of, it's almost an out of body thing of like, that story you're telling yourself is true until it's not, right? I don't know if that's what.
No, I really appreciate you saying that. One of the things that made me think of is just how little we actually know about the reality of other people's romantic lives. And I think that's also a sort of like cultural story that gets told, because if you watch TV on any given night, you are constantly watching these people that are going on this like endless series of dates and having, they have a boyfriend for 3 months, and then they have a girlfriend for a week, and then, whatever it is that they're doing. And it's just constant. It's just constant, because there's nothing nefarious about it. But when you add all that up, I also realized recently that my whole life, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this, you see a man and a woman together, also very heteronormative to me, but if you see a man and a woman together doing something, just 2 people, you always assume that they're a couple. But I know in my own life, when I'm out doing something with one other person, it happens all the time, like all the time. And it doesn't mean I'm on a date. It usually doesn't, It could be my cousin, it could be, a good friend. It could be a married friend, it could be somebody that is like a brother to me, it could be anybody.
And that literally happens with my sister when we go out. Like, and and it's weird. And it also feels like we have to sort of explain who we are to everyone, like, or just in general. Like, I don't know why we have to like sort of say, who cares? Like, I don't know, but it's just like, I think there's all this language, like when you go to a restaurant, it's like, oh, thanks for coming on your date or whatever bullshit. And it's just like, no, we're just two people. Like it doesn't, that's a very narrow-minded like way of thinking of relationships. But I think I internalized that too, where a guy and a girl together, oh, that was, and it was hard for me to be friends with women too, because I sort of always saw when I was friends with women, it was because like, oh, I really like this person. I like all their foibles and things. And to me, that meant other things. To them, it didn't, and obviously it makes sense. But like, that's why it was confusing. Cause it's like, I wanted a friend first. I didn't necessarily know that, but that was sort of the kind of love that I want, like a best friend, kind of a love.
Right. I mean, I am right there with you. And with the significant difference is that I have always had a very easy time being friends with men. Really, like from my earliest childhood, honestly, I have had friends that are guys and they were young boys when I was a young girl, obviously, but or hope that's obvious. Oh, what a weird clarification to make, Marissa. Okay. But yeah,
that's going to be the quote that I use for this episode. They were young boys and I was a young girl.
I have a group thread. It's not super active, but it has been more so during the pandemic, honestly. I have one of my only like group chats that I even have is with 4 friends of mine from high school, and they're all guys and me. And it's so the 5 of us, we're old friends. And that's been the case. And I've only had crushes on 3 of them over the course of I'm just thinking back because what I was going to say was like, it's not like I always fall in love with my male friends. That's definitely true. But it's also like, I've known these guys collectively for decades and decades. Like I was bound to have a crush on 1 or 2 of them for like a week or 2 in middle school or high school there somewhere, but for the most part, it's easy to separate those things. That being said, it's funny because it does end up creating this weird kind of like gray area where you might not even realize that you have deep feelings for someone until you've been friends with them for a while. And then it's like, then what? Then what do you do? It's very complicated.
But you're not saying that you have that right now, right? Are we in a Dear Abby situation? Okay.
Oh, you mean with you?
No. No, I meant with,
I do not
with someone
have that right
out there.
Now.
No,
I don't have that right now. That would be so funny though for me to come on and be like, I'm going to do the deepest subtweet of my crush. It's going to be so secret that maybe he'll find it. I'll post about it on Instagram and he'll click on the link. No, that's something that definitely a younger Marissa would have done. Now my vibe is more like, I don't even know what I want. I've been in a little bit of a time of confusion. Online dating is something that I actually remember like finding out that a coworker was online dating like back in, I don't know, like 2007, 2008 or something, and having this, I'm in my mid 20s, early 20s. And I was just like, oh my God, that just seems so awful. Like how weird. Because you just go meet, like, I want to go meet people in the real world. I don't want to meet people online. And as time has progressed, society has also changed in a way that's become like a very, very commonplace thing. And I long ago cast away my sense that it was somehow weird or less desirable than other dating modes. Like it's just normal.
Right.
But what I was unable to ever fully cast aside was my own like hesitancy about it. Just my own sense of like, listen, I go out and do things all the time. I meet people. How am I supposed to draw conclusions about anybody based on their dating profile? And then I'm supposed to meet strangers. Just like the whole mechanism of it seemed so bizarre to me. And I'm a person who, like, I have a certain amount of like social superpower, not to overstate it, but in an interpersonal situation, I am pretty good at reading a person and a person that, I guess I don't mean reading a person like they're my mark or something, but I'm pretty good
I know what you mean.
at navigating a social situation, getting a sense for someone and gauging that and, knowing where to go from there. But I feel like through the lens, through the glass of your phone screen, that is totally turned off. And you look at profiles and you're like, okay, this person is cute, but I don't know how to take the fact that, he didn't answer any of the questions. This person is, seems nice here, but then this detail makes me feel like they might be insane. And also, why are all these pictures taken in the same like 3-minute span? Obviously, like you don't care enough to like find a nice picture of yourself to put on your dating profile. Like, skip. So it doesn't make me feel good to reject people, but it also has always felt there's something that just feels antithetical to me about like that method of finding a partner, especially when your directive is, I don't want to have a boyfriend for boyfriend's sake. I don't want to have a partner just for the sake of partnership. You have this, that's honestly where the romance part comes in, where it's this being a romantic comes in.
Right.
Where you're
want to discover someone, you want to fall in love with someone, but you can't, once you say that, it's sort of like saying, oh, I'm in the moment with you right now in this conversation. And now when I say that, I'm now out of it. I'm looking over us. And it's, to me, it's performative, right? There's something about it. It's like social media where it's so curated but it's also really hard to tell meaning sometimes based on people's texts, messages, or like if you saw my face when I said, maybe if I like, okay, we'll use the ramen example where like it sounded kind of like I was insulting you even when you saw me. But if I had sent that as a text, it would have been even more insulting, right? Because you didn't.
Sure.
So like it's sort of that and I feel like it makes it hard to. Yeah. It's sometimes harder to communicate, especially since you don't know the other person in that scenario.
Yeah. Well, and I had this was not this particular round of online dating, but several years ago, one of my first dates that I ever went on with somebody who was a guy that, I liked him pretty well. I think it was like a second date that I was on with this guy, but I didn't really know him yet. And that's how I felt. It was just like, I'm giving this a chance. I owe it to myself. I owe it to this experiment or whatever to give it a chance. I don't know if I care yet. And I remember this guy asking me, like, are you looking for a serious relationship? And I felt so paralyzed by that question because on the one hand, like, yeah, in theory, but on the other hand, like it would be false for me to say that I'm looking for a serious relationship with you. You are like, I don't know you. Like, how can I want that with somebody that I don't know? And so that's the kind of mental mindset that is, magnified times, everybody that's in my, 5-mile radius on a dating app. Yeah. I don't really have to 5 miles. That would be way too small for LA.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like I empathize with that so much, because, it makes so much sense. I feel like it's the pressure. There's pressure on every time you're meeting someone for it to mean something, right? Like when it couldn't just be going to have dinner. It is an experiment. Like you said, that's the best way. It's almost like art in a way of like, I don't know what this is, but I won't find out unless I go outside the door. And then we go, but like talking about how serious is like, are we going to win an Oscar together right now? Like, it's just like, what the fuck? I don't know your name.
Meanwhile, I am very fortunate to have a life that is actually quite full of friends and family that I love, of strong relationships, of people that I want to spend my time with that I already know, like that I already don't have enough hours in the day to spend time with. So you're also kind of prioritizing something that you don't know of yet over the reality of what one does have in one's life. But I think what you're getting at is like simultaneously like the best and worst part of this particular dating mechanism. On the one hand, there's all this pressure on the every outing to maybe result in some kind of amazing, miraculous thing. But on the other hand, and I think this is the reason that it's gotten so hard out there for people like myself, and until this pandemic hit, who's just like going out and like seeing who I meet in the world, for sure that that's what you're there for. Like, you meet when you go on an online date. I mean, for sure that, okay, we're both here trying to see if this is going to work romantically. You're never going to encounter the situation of, hey, we accidentally fell in love with your best friend or whatever it is. And now you're going to have to decide what to do about that. And it's going to suck or be hard no matter what. Even the good outcome is going to be hard because you have to figure out how to transition into that other thing.
Right. But there's something more appealing about that idea, right? Because it's like, it's what we've grown up loving, those stories. But they're like not appealing in like the dramatic sense, but it's also, it feels like a better story. And we both are, how do you define being a romantic? Maybe that's a good place to anchor us too. Cause like, to me, that's sort of how I sometimes think of it. It's like, it's about the story. It's like, and obviously to be romantic with one another and to like, be so over the top kind of with feelings in a way, but also honest, right? Like, but like, how do you define that?
There was I think you're right. A lot of it is about the story. I think that there is, there's the phrase like the hopeless romantic, but I think that's a bit of a misnomer because I think something fundamentally, like a fundamental quality of a hopeless romantic is sort of like, hope abides, like hope springs eternal kind of thing of like, I think that whether we're talking about it in a relationship sense or something more platonic, I think the idea of like love being like the powerful guiding force in the universe, love being, the whole like God is love, whatever. I think that is something that I feel very invested in. And I also feel very invested in the sort of like spiritual power of storytelling and meaning making. And I do think that all of that is like kind of romantic. On a more granular level, like I can think of a particular time that I was with a guy who I had known for a while and had definitely found that our tight bond. He wasn't like a best friend or anything, but as friends, we just had these really deep, wonderful conversations. And he seemed very like interested in what I had to say and just like all the things that you want in a partner. Plus he was very handsome. And we were somewhere, but he had a girlfriend, he had some girlfriend that he never called by her first name when we talked about her. And like, it was just like one of these girls, like I was complaining about in my bitter line in my play, where it's just like, this is someone who's like ancillary to this person's life. I don't want to be that person in my romantic partner's life. I want to be there. I don't need to be there everything, but I want to be important and integrated part of their world, especially if we've been together for a while. Right. So anyway, I want them to refer to me by my name when they talk to me, and when they talk about you. I want them to refer to me by my name when they talk about me to other people. That's, so anyway, I want to hold that position in someone's like heart and mind. Anyway, I was with this guy and we were walking. So I traveled somewhere where I needed to be for some volunteer thing, and he was going to a class, and it started to rain, and we had to run through the rain to get into the building. And I think we were sharing an umbrella or something. And I said to him, because it was true, I was like, that is one of the most romantic things that's ever happened to me. And I'm sure he was like, oh yeah, but it remains true. It remains true. It was very romantic.
It is. Yeah. What is it about the rain? And we were together, we were we were trying to protect each other. We were trying to get to a place. It was funny, we're laughing. It was you're two people together trying to, get through, what the sky is, falling down on you. So the elements.
Yeah, it's very, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I proposed to Lily after running through the rain. We did that. It was planned anyway, but it was after a concert, and then we had to like run home. Like it just was pouring, and we just had to get back to our Airbnb in Mexico. And it was just like, oh yeah, you just got to do it now, Andy. All right. But I had the realization before the rain, sort of during that moment, during the concert that we were in. But anyway, yeah, that was our.
Yeah. I think it is a sort of instinctual thing. And that kind of like trusting your instincts, sort of like the way that is related to a romantic, I don't know, worldview is also something that is challenging about the online dating platform. It's like, and I will say that one part of the kind of confusing, like wandering through the desert that I feel like I have kind of gotten through in the past few months has been related to the idea of, well, can I trust my instincts here or not? You know, if the very exercise of doing the online dating is already kind of me rejecting my very strong instinct that it is not really for me, like not really the best method for me, then in doing it, I am saying like, okay, well, maybe I'm wrong about that. And I need to challenge that. But then it becomes a slippery slope. You know, if I say, okay, well, this guy seems like I don't hate him, like he seems sane and like not I'm serious, like,
no, I know.
There's this like low bar that it's just like, well, I got to meet him first, and then I meet him, and then it's like, okay, this is fine, and then we get together and it's like, well, I'm not I don't hate this, but I'm not like really excited about it. Does that mean that I as a person just need more time to get excited about it, or does that mean this isn't happening? And then if we go out again because of that, how far down do I have to tamp my discomfort before I am being untrue to myself? You know, like how much going outside of my comfort zone can I do before what I'm actually doing is like an act of self-betrayal?
Right. And that's that yoing you were talking about. I mean, I think it feels like for me, well, I don't think there's a way I can answer. Like, I don't know if there was a question there. I don't think there's a way.
But I think definitely rhetorical.
But I think,
but please try to answer it.
Well, no, I think the answer is that there is none, which is really frustrating. But I think it's sort of this desire to have a rubric about, you know, there's after 3 dates, if I feel nothing, then it's over. That's the rule. And I think that's why we always love in sitcoms when, you know, like How I Met Your Mother made it like all the different rules about dating. I was going to mention How I Met Your Mother earlier. Yeah, like all about the rules of dating and all these different things that were all so like funny and packaged really well. So like it was like, oh, that's true. There's something true in there. And it's like, but it's never, there's no one way. And I remember I was talking to a friend who might be listening. He was going through a breakup during the pandemic, and it was a really tough time for him. And he was sort of just bemoaning in the same, like, not, and bemoaning sounds like complaining, but like basically similar to you, was not into the online dating thing. And I think it had the romantic sense of like, it's not a good story. Like, I want to have this like really cool, interesting way to meet someone. And my only thing I could think of was like, hey, I think whoever you meet that actually means that something to you, that story is going to be full of meaning and cool. Like, just, it's gonna be reflective of you and that person, I think. And so that could mean online dating, because you could meet, you know, Mel, the man that has the exact same fears about online dating. And then you guys like sort of discover that over ramen. Right. Or you could just meet him at a mutual friend's birthday party. I don't know, but now you're going to be looking for a Mel.
I think that Mel sounds old. He sounds like an old man, but I can understand why he might, you know, be feeling some misgivings about getting back out there after all these years, you know. But I think that for a long time, that story thing, which I know is like a Ted Mosby, had some girl with crazy eyes. Boy, that show, I watched that show religiously, and it didn't realize until years after it was over how much like damage it probably did to me psychologically. I'll have to go back and look at it again. Because it was like in my 20s too, right? So it's like, oh, this is what this is. These are the rules. Like, no, it was a joke. It was a joke all along. I didn't need to take it seriously. But you got to understand, like, I did not have a mother for my teenage years. Like, I'm just like muddling through. So you have, I think that for a long time, that probably was part of it. Now I know enough couples that have gotten together, like very happy couples that have met online, that I could never feel like, oh, that's not a good way to meet. Like, it seems like I know examples of people that have been, had bad dates and good dates, and then
right. I think it's actually
the one,
right. I think it's more of a, like, that expression is more indicative of like discomfort with the dating apps. It's more of like, that's why it doesn't feel like a good story, because, oh, I don't actually feel comfortable doing it. So that's a reason why I don't like it. But does that make sense? Like, I'm not saying, and there's no right or wrong either. Like, it's just more like, I don't know, but it's interesting. Like, you're fighting this discomfort in yourself just using the app in general. And then it's almost like, oh, well, am I not able to trust myself at all? Right. That's really interesting.
Well, one thing that happens over and over again when you talk to people, if I voice to anybody, or maybe anyone who's listening to this, hears me say like, oh, online dating, I had a really negative feeling about it when I first started, people will say like, oh yeah, it's awful. Like, it's like, oh, of course you hated it. Who likes it? We do have a mutual friend who apparently thinks it's the greatest thing ever. But, but yeah, people say like, oh yeah, it's terrible, and it's like, okay, great. I think I do. I mean, we can't know what's going on in other people's hearts or minds. I do kind of feel like what I'm talking about is something different from that,
right.
Like something different from just the like, oh God, this slog, and more like I feel like my hands are tied behind my back. Like, I feel like you're asking me to like walk through my metaphor is failing me. I feel like, I feel blindfolded. Like I can't use the senses that I'm used to using, interpersonally, to navigate this world. But I mean, I think that
makes sense.
The thing about, I've referred a few times now to having kind of like gone through a process, or like muddling through, like, going through the wilderness or whatever. And I do feel like it's something that at this point I have kind of come through to a certain extent. And by that, I can't say that I mean, oh, I've made my peace with online dating, because I started this new job. I don't know which end is up. Like, I have not been taking the time to do it. And I feel okay with that. Also, pandemic stuff continues, with ebbs and flows, and we're just coming down from a pretty hard period for that.
Yeah.
So I have my reasons, maybe the excuses, I don't know, but that's part of the thing too. It's like, is this an excuse or is this a reason? All the go-to kind of pop psychology reasonings, like reasons that people give as to why they're single, or why they think you're single. Like, are those things true, or is it something else? I don't know. But I was hoping or thinking that it might be useful for me to read some notes to myself that I wrote where I was working through this. Is that okay with you?
That would be so good. So
this first note I wrote to myself back in November, before it was like a third date with someone who was fine. I didn't have a real feeling about this person.
A human being. Okay.
Yeah. So I was trying to kind of like figure out like, oh, well, what is it that's like, is it just not a match? I mean, that's the thing, is that like, until you do it a million times, like, it's totally reasonable. And I know this cognitively for a person, you don't just because you have some things in common with a person, just because they're like, okay, doesn't mean that you have to like date them forever. Doesn't mean that you have to date them at all.
No.
No. So, but I feel like you got to give it a few tries, right? If everything, I don't know, that's how I was feeling. Like, I need to see what happens. So,
okay.
I was waiting. I was eating dinner. I wrote this to myself. I wrote this speaks directly to something I referenced before. I spent my whole life trusting my instincts. They've steered me many places, but not toward the love I'm looking for. So now I find myself in the position of purposefully going against my instincts, First, the instinct that online matchmaking is not for me. Then my instinct that attempting intimacy with a stranger is not for me. Perhaps unsurprisingly, this leads me to a place where I doubt my instincts about the dates themselves. Is he weird, or am I just being judgmental? Am I not attracted to them, or have I just not given it enough time? And this is a slippery slope straight toward, is there something wrong with me? Or less moralistically, am I incapable of the feelings and emotions that are necessary for love and dating to occur? And then I find myself face to face with a self-proposed description of a woman I do not recognize. She is not me. Is she? No. But what if she is? So that was in November. I wrote that. And then you asked me about being a romantic, and this is like extremely cheesy kind of moment of realization. But recently, I guess it was last month, I think. I might have been in January even. I went to see Westside Story. Westside Story, the musical version of Westside Story, I have long said was like my favorite movie musical. You know, it's got its issues, absolutely, but I love the music. I love the story, and the new adaptation is just, it's like better. You know, it's like when I found out that the movie was being made, I was like, why? This seems pointless. I think that was a lot of people's feeling. But when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay. I don't know why you did that. I still don't know why, but like, I'm glad that it happened. So
yeah, it sort of felt like a story that needed to be updated and told with the right people in it.
And other creative decisions that were made as a part of this really enhanced the story a lot too. Anyway, listen, the love story that's central to West Side Story is pretty stupid. I mean, from a realism perspective, it's just like these two people, they see each other, they fall in love. They're teenagers. It's like based on nothing. And I don't want to pretend or I don't aspire to that specific kind of thing.
Right. We're not giving.
Part of the tragedy of that story even is that they are so young, like they don't even really know who they are yet. You know, it's their youth and naivete is part of the tragedy. But the movie ends up being a lot about love. And watching this movie that I loved so much when I was younger, this new, bright, crisp, modern, version, but I mean, still set in the past, really like it was, I don't know, it was like it reminded me of a certain kind of feeling. So this is what I wrote. This is like this was never intended for me to read or show anywhere. So I just thought it was in the spirit of the Naked Man podcast. Yeah, so I change from second person to first person.
I do that all the time.
Yeah. Okay. Before seeing the movie, you had this thought, thinking about high school. Oh, there was so much longing. You were always longing for something, longing for the future mostly. Now that I'm deep into the future, I often question that longing. I wonder if I was wrong to long or if I can never be satisfied with reality. The aha here was also that my feeling of missing passion, of listlessness, may largely be that I don't have much to direct my longing toward right now. Then you see the movie. We're back to second person here. Okay. The movie you loved so much since girlhood. It's tragic, but there's a glimpse there of something so thick and honeyed, a kind of love that lights up the lover, that's undeniable. And I've been seeing my failure to find that love as a personal failure. But look, I can see now. It's so rare. It's deeply, intensely rare. What I've always wanted is that or nothing. And I have hoped so many times that I might have found it in some guy or other. I proceed to list like 9 different guys that I have hoped for since like 10th grade, maybe 9th grade. And now who? It's hard to believe I can find it in a profile. But if I know that's what I'm looking for, at least I can stop thinking of it as a feeling of mine. I'm looking for something rare and frightening. I think it might radiate off of me that this is the kind of love I'm seeking. And either the other party is drawn to that light, ready to meet me in its glow, or they aren't. That's okay. It's okay to know what I'm looking for, what I'm longing for, even, especially if I'm aware that I might not find it. There was something just so freeing about, and that's why I had to like get it down in words for myself. Like sometimes I find myself thinking through these kind of little entries, like what is it that I'm experiencing? And also like a note to myself to like remember when I'm feeling bad about something or feeling a certain way about something. Like, oh, you had this clarity, you need to get it down. And this is something that felt like a sort of freeing moment of clarity. Like it's very sad to think like, oh, maybe I won't find it. But it's nice to be like, okay, I know that I'm looking for something special. And like, that's why I haven't found it yet.
Yeah.
Not because I am not just looking for someone that I'm okay spending a couple evenings a week with. You know, I want something that's more than that, something extra.
You deserve more than that.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah. I want to say, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just wanted to say thank you for reading those. And like, I feel like we work through things similarly. Like, I think like I can just tell. I'm like, yep, that's like I do definitely do the ruminating thing or thinking about it. Then I have to sort of write it out as like almost a story, but sort of it words I think help me figure out what I'm feeling rather than sometimes it can be intellectualizing, but it's actually more. I'm fishing for what I'm feeling with the words. And then eventually I get there. And I really like where you end on that. Like that, yeah, it's fucking hard. It's nothing to do with you or any lack within you. I mean, not that you need me to say that. I want to say that because like, I believe it.
Well, thank you. I know what you mean and also very much appreciate hearing it.
Yeah. We didn't have a goal here of like, you know, it's like, maybe this is, this is someone's going to reach out and come on and fall in love with you through listening to this. That was not the goal, but hey, who knows?
It is a weird thing about me that I realized during this most recent bout of these dates is that there is now a lot of me and my inner workings out in the world if somebody wanted to see it. You know, like you said, I write a weekly newsletter. I like to call it a publication because newsletter implies that I'm giving people news about myself, which is not really what it is at all. But I write Metaphor every week and I have 4 years of podcast that is, you know, it's ostensibly about Sweet Valley High, but you know, there's a lot. I get honest and personal on that show when it comes up and talk a lot about what an Elizabeth I am. So if somebody wanted to, I had a guy ask to read my screenplay. And I was just like, okay, you can, but knowing to myself, like, I have put myself into this. This is me. Like you read this, you're not going to know which parts are most me and which parts are least me, but
I think we're landing the plane now.
I agree.
Yeah, I think the airport is what can be more romantic than the airport. Fuck. I think airports are not any. I don't know if they ever were, but certainly not now.
You know, bringing it back to 30 Rock, Liz Lemon once in a romantic gesture very quickly ate an entire giant sub sandwich because she was not allowed to take it through security so that she could go meet a man who was about to catch a plane. So
that is romantic.
Yeah, but it's a good example of why airports are less romantic now than they might have been in Casablanca era.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Casablanca, you could just like walk on the parking lot.
I mean, I guess that was the 40s. Like airplanes barely existed.
Everything was more romantic in Casablanca, just in general. That movie, and then I'm wearing Lost in Translation shirt. Mm-hmm. That's another romance that I think tapped into something in me when I watched it. I was like, oh, fuck. To me, romance is also loneliness. Yeah. I think that's what life is too. But I think I much rather wait for something exciting than settle. And I think that's where you're at. And I think you've always been that, but it's that fear that and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but sort of maybe the fear that you will lose yourself or that you will get not desperate, or something, but you will settle. But it feels like to me that you're very, I don't know. I think I've always seen you as very solid and comfortable in yourself.
Thanks.
So, yeah.
Well, maybe that's part of the reason why I'm still single is that I'm not I'm not giving off any kind of energy of being interested in something else. So, I mean, I guess this corrects the record for that and to a certain extent. But you're right that what I am very solid in is my sense that I am unwilling to settle. And what I'm interrogating a little bit is just like, well, what does that mean though? You know, I guess I feel like I need to try things out before I fully reject them, you know? Like I've always felt that way about things. And so that's kind of what I'm doing with the online dating is that like what I need to do next, and I can't say that I'm really working at this right now, but what I need to do next is to find a way to have these two things coexist. Like how can I try to use this method that has become so ubiquitous to see if there's, you know, that person out there for me and simultaneously make sure that I'm not, you know, just kind of like going along with something to be nice, you know, which.
Is it right to say that you're sort of trying to figure out how to make this more Marissa, like make this more you?
Yeah.
Like I had a block, and this is totally different, but like sending query letters, I hate it. I don't like it. I don't know. It's really hard for me to do. And I have to like make the letter be me. You know, I have to make it be, and that will say, like a lot of people will say no to that because it's going to be it's not going to be a normal query letter because I'm not normal. Or I don't want to like follow the rules, right? Or whatever it's supposed to be. And so like, and then once I thought that, I was like, okay, what can I do to make this query letter more Andy and more representative of me? And then that feels more likely in a way that I'm saying this children's book that I'm selling is the same thing you're selling yourself. But like, what, yeah, like how can this like almost bureaucratic, weird system of meeting people be more fun and interesting and more Marissa? And I think, like you said, trying things, I guess that's all. It's fucking terrifying to try things. So please let me know, give me updates on the experiment and let me know. I don't think this isn't, I don't know. Like I always just want to help people and I definitely comes from like that fix it mentality of like a guy thing, which is terrible. So it's not that, it's more just like, however I can be of service in this realm, I'm down. Cause it does feed the sort of the teen drama living vicariously through. I'm in, I'm like, oh, okay. Let's oh
man. Yeah. Well, I definitely need some of my friends to, you know, meddle a little more in my love life. That would really
do you really?
Yeah. That would really, not only would it keep me from having to meet people online, but it also would really fully like Sweet Valleyify my life, you know?
That's what I'm saying. What character do you need me to play?
I mean, I need a Jessica is what I need. I don't know if you have that in you, Andy.
All right. Well, okay. So your homework is pick the book that has the best Jessica in it, or at least one that I can learn. And then I'll see if I have that in me.
Okay. I might, maybe I'll pivot and ask you to be an Enid.
Well, whether I am
everybody always wants to be Enid.
Everyone wants to be. Enid sounds like me. Jessica, Enid, I will be, I don't know. I'll be Andy as well. And I guess that's sort of my question at the end is always asking how I can be a better friend for you. But I feel like you just answered it. I need to be a Jessica or an Enid. So what does that mean, dear listeners? I'm not entirely sure. I did read one book. You can find my episode, but I am blanking on who they are.
Jessica was definitely a main figure in that, but she wasn't quite herself in that one. So.
Okay. But yeah, Marissa, I think like I said it on the intro in terms of our friendship, you sort of just come to bat whenever I put the Marissa like lights out, and you're here and willing to help and chat and share yourself, which is so cool. So thank you for being with me.
Oh, well, you're very welcome.
I'm so grateful to Marissa for joining me and trusting me, and to you all for listening to our conversation. So often when I'm hearing these conversations back and editing the episodes, I cringe at myself. I so often wish I would just shut up. I try to keep many of those moments intact to showcase that I'm learning every time I record. But in this conversation with Marissa in particular, it was clear to me on multiple occasions that I wasn't the best listener. There are a few moments, but the one that stood out to me the most was after Marissa shared meaningful, honest quotes from her play, and I quickly made it about my experiences as a single person and then made the fumbling ramen comparison. This sent the conversation into a different direction, not necessarily a worse one, but it was a missed opportunity to give space to her feelings to explore them further. As I said after the clumsy ramen incident, this podcast is about being accountable, and I wouldn't be doing my job as a host if I didn't own up when I wasn't at my best, and I'm sorry about that. I also am aware of how hard I can be on myself and am working not to expect perfection, but that doesn't mean I can't be better. To that effect, I wanted to share that I recently listened to a KCRW Life Examined podcast from last year called Why Good Listening Matters. After listening to it, it became even clearer to me that so much of the confusion and chaos in our world stems from poor listening skills. But you, my friends, are the best listeners I know, and for those hungry for more in their ear holes, you can find the soundtrack of Marissa's life and all others on the Naked Man Spotify page. Please rate and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell all your friends and online matches. And if you like what I'm doing, if you like what you're hearing, do me a favor. Please join my Patreon, join this community, and be part of the conversation. Be empowered in where this show goes from here. The Patreon link is in the episode description. And if you can't afford to donate, not to worry, reach out and I'll invite you to our Discord and to our new newsletter, Wanderings. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at NakedManPod, and don't hesitate to reach out to us at nakedmanpod@gmail.com. If you have any thoughts and feelings you'd like to share about love, perhaps, call and leave a message at the Naked Man phone line at 747-231-7120. Next time on the Naked Man podcast, we have another yummy monologue. Oh boy. In the meantime, as my dad always says, be sweet. This episode of the Naked Man podcast was conceived by Andy Green in collaboration with Marissa Flaxbart. The Naked Man is a podcast hosted, created, and produced by me, Andy Green. All music was composed by Robert Panico, and all graphics were created by the man who recommended KCRW's Life Examined podcast to me, Christopher Miles.